Welcome to another exciting episode of the Luminary Panel, the entrepreneurial podcast where we fuel minds with insights and inspirations. My name is Liliana Fidua, and today we have an incredible episode lined up for you. We're joined by our insightful interviewer, Johnston Jennings, a leading voice in the entrepreneurial and networking space. Our special guest is Heather Beebe, who is a certified holistic wellness mentor who has successfully harnessed the power of personal development to achieve her dreams. Together, we will dive into the importance of becoming your best self and how it directly ties into the entrepreneurial successes. Get ready to be inspired and empowered by their wisdom and experiences in today's episode. Shout out to one of our sponsors, Zico Space and Clubhouse. As you guys know, we did the Luminary Panel Season 1 on Zoom, and so we were looking for a podcast studio to film. And now here I am in Zico Space and Clubhouse, and here they have multiple rooms, one being the lounge, a conference room, and a podcast studio. They serve many different beverages, including tea, coffee, and kava, and their main mission is to be a place where people can come together and work together. So if you can, stop by. It's right outside of downtown Orlando, and it's a great place to work and meet others. Hope you try it.
All right, we're back with another episode of the Luminary Panel. I have another special guest with me, Heather Beebe. How you doing, ma'am?
I am great. How are you?
I'm doing well. So tell the audience about what you do, who you are, and we'll get into the conversation today.
Sure. So I am a holistic health coach, and there's a whole story to my journey of becoming that. But at this point, I am launching luxury wellness retreats that are much more than your traditional retreat experience. They are a 3-day experience with multiple practitioners and experts, all bringing a customized experience to you based on conversations that I have with my clients on what they're looking for, what they are, their goals are, their aspirations, what they're looking to achieve in life, in business, in wellness. And I have a dynamic team of experts who bring different modalities and skills to the table, and we put together a fabulous experience. So that's the direction that I'm taking my coaching at this time.
Nice.
Yeah.
So let's rewind all the way to the beginning, because once we had a conversation in the earlier part of us figuring out how we could schedule this meeting, you were telling me about your backstory and how it just hit you like a truck. Mm-hmm. So let's go into that.
So I don't know how far back you want to go.
As far as you need to.
I'll start from, and I won't give you my whole life story, but I am originally from Canada, Ontario, Canada.
Okay.
Small town girl, grew up. When I say small town, I'm talking no streetlights. No, it was very much in the wilderness of Canada.
Yeah.
And grew up on a farm, grew up in a very religious setting. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of wholesome things about it, but also a lot of small-mindedness about it. So grew up kind of with the teachings and the belief system that you stay there, you get married, you have children, and you just remain in this small town with the same people, the same experiences. And college wasn't really pushed. Furthering your education, not many people did it. Traveling, there was a lot of things that just were normal experiences for most people, but that wasn't really promoted. It was you stay here, you go to church, you live a very simple, small life. Mm-hmm. And I look at where I was then and where I am now, and everything that has transpired internally to get me here.
Yeah.
Because when you grow up with that, you don't have people telling you can do anything you want, you can be anything you want. Yeah. The sky's the limit. In fact, you have people who, not intentionally, but they some people aren't supportive of your dreams, or you start to take those first steps. So I made the decision to leave and move to Florida. I was 23 years old. I was a single mom. My baby was 18 months old.
Wow.
And I had never lived anywhere else.
Yeah.
And really it was because I hated the winters. I needed sun and beach. Oh my gosh, it was brutal. So winter, 9 months of the year was not cool.
Yeah.
And I also just was feeling so stifled internally. And so I was like, I'm leaving. And I had friends here actually in Jacksonville, Florida. And I said, I'm going to Jacksonville. Moved, lived with my friend for a couple years, got settled, started working in the preschool industry as a preschool teacher so that I could be where my daughter was. And you talk about a learning curve coming from how that small town, small-mindedness, and leaving, traveling, moving to a new state, new experiences, new people. And it was like being on a different planet to some extent.
Yeah.
I think there was something inside of me that knew there was more for me on some level.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that looked like, and I didn't know how to get there. I absolutely did not know how to get there. I was shy. I was quiet. I was introverted. And so I kept to myself. From that point on, I kept to myself in a bubble, because I felt like I had to protect myself. I had to keep myself safe. If you wanted, I think the best way to describe it is talk about dysregulated nervous system. So shock to my system, going from just being ripped out of everything I had known by choice and knowing that I needed to do that. I knew that I needed to do that. I knew it was the right decision. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but it was like, I can't stay small.
Perfect. This is a good point to piggyback on, because I know when I think Canada, I'm thinking big.
Yeah.
And for you to say that you were living in a smaller town, I can resonate with that, because I'm originally from St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
And it's, well, not really St. Louis, Missouri. I say St. Louis, Missouri because it's easier to say than Belleville, Illinois.
Same.
And it's like right next door to St. Louis. So it's easier to say that. So Belleville, Illinois is a very, very, very small city where everybody knows everybody and everybody is stuck in their own way. But as a young man, I realized that that's not what I wanted for me. Even though I had no choice at the time because I was still young, my mom and my dad had the decision to okay, let's move to Florida and let's give him a better scenery so he can understand the environment is bigger than where he's from.
Wow.
Right? So I can resonate with that. I'm sure some of our audience can resonate with that. But the part that I want you to kind of indulge in is the part where once you made the decision, how did you know what to break free from? Mentally, spiritually, physically, what was that process like? Because a lot of people are probably in that scenario now and they just don't know the answers to get out of that hunch.
For me, it started with very physical things. It started with things like, okay, you're going to be driving in traffic that you're not used to, right? So really simple, and it sounds funny to say it now, but that for me was huge. So it was like, okay, get used to living in the city. Again, I mentioned earlier, I was in a town with no streetlights, right? No stoplights. So, and we had to drive an hour and a half to go grocery shopping. And so I knew what being in a city was like, but that had never been my day-to-day life. I didn't know what it was like to have to lock your doors. We were very just free. We had wide open space. We ran and we played and, worked in the garden and, so it was like this, leaving this bubble and I had to get used to and learn. I'm trying to think. Have you ever seen the movie The Village?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Well,
I think I've heard of it though.
You should watch it. It's where, they grow up in basically the woods, and they're taught everything out there is bad. You can't leave the woods. You can't leave this space that we've created, because everything out there is bad and evil, and you'll be hurt.
Yeah.
And so they're still dressing in like clothes from like the 1800s, and they're still like, their life hasn't progressed.
Yeah.
You should now watch the movie.
Okay.
That is very similar to how I grew up. When I say a very religious setting, like very religiously controlled. So I had the religion to break free from. I had the brainwashing that goes along with that to break free from, which is a very hard thing to do. If anyone listening ever grew up or spent time in any kind of religious commune or very religious home even, or, I went to our small Christian private school that was just for us that went to this church. Like, it was just for us. So that creates almost a fear of anything else, even though you can feel it and you can see it and you want it. There, you have been programmed to have this fear of anything else out there. You're taught that everything is bad.
Yeah.
And so I had all of that to overcome. So it was like, not only was it a big physical move and getting used to things like driving in different traffic, how do I get an apartment? How do I had to learn all these things in my early 20s, which is not normal for most people.
Absolutely.
And then all the internal stuff, and that's where the dysregulated nervous system comes in. I didn't feel safe in a lot of ways. Not afraid for my life, but I didn't feel safe because I was not near anything that I was used to, that I was familiar with.
Yeah.
And does that answer your question?
It does. I think you touched on a few points that I think a lot of people can resonate in, because obviously, to piggyback on the movie's perspective and what you had to go through and what I had to go through was more so a point of limitation based off of what they knew, right? I had to learn that for myself as I got older. Like, my parents, my grandparents, my friends are raised based off of a limitation or a mindset that they want you to be in, because they don't know anything else outside of that, right? So that's a perfect example with the movie The Villages. But what was difficult for me was the piece where I was the one that wanted to break free. And once I made a decision to break free and go against from my parents, my loved ones, my friends, it was difficult for them to kind of grasp it, even though they wanted to support you in that space.
Yes.
How did you deal with that?
Yeah. I actually had, I felt a lot of guilt. I remember my dad crying at the airport as me and, at that time, his only grandbaby were getting on a plane and moving.
Yeah. And
I had only seen my dad cry a handful of times, and most of them had been because of me and ways that I was disappointing him. And I remember feeling so much guilt, and it was like, how can I feel? I was so confused how I could feel so pulled to do something and make this move when it was hurting the people that I loved the most.
Yeah.
And I actually didn't get over that guilt until years later, when I started doing a lot of inner work on myself and realized how much wounding I had from prior years and prior experiences. I had never taken the time to heal.
Yeah.
And so really, in that moment, how I dealt with it was I buried it. Not that that was the healthiest way. I didn't know that there was any other way. At that time, I wasn't open, or I wasn't aware of personal development and a lot of things, a lot of tools that I've now used in my healing, like inner child work and all of that stuff. I just didn't have the knowledge of actually processing things and working through things. And so I buried them, and it was like, no, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. You just do what you want to do, and they'll love you regardless. Thankfully they did. And to what you were saying earlier about they do the best they can. They have done the best they can with their level of consciousness, right? And that is, again, something I didn't know at that time. I didn't see it at that time.
Yeah.
It was like there was also a level of anger in me around why have you made this so hard for me? Why have you made life so hard for me? Why did you keep me so small and sheltered from things? And now for me to have any experiences, I'm learning a lot of things for the first time. Why did you have to make it so hard for me?
Yeah.
And of course, it was, again, years later when I started doing the healing work on myself that it was like, you start to see them through eyes of compassion because you realize they were doing exactly what they thought was best for you. And also, if you want to take it to another level, this kind of goes into something that can be controversial. It all kind of depends on your beliefs, but if you believe in past lives or if you believe that your soul chose this life. I do believe that. Part of the reason I believe that is I feel empowered when I believe that. So if I believe my soul chose to come into this body and have the experiences, the exact experiences that I have had. I chose my parents. I chose, and I chose that because there's something I'm supposed to learn in this life. And so when I look at it from that lens, I don't see it from a victim stance of why did you make my life so hard? Why was I dealt this deck of cards? I chose this deck of cards. I need to experience this deck of cards. And I need to learn every lesson that there is for me to learn. And I now feel empowered to play this deck of cards however the hell I want to play it.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. If we're going down that way and that belief, like, for example, if I had, in my belief, I believe in God and he has a purpose for me, so he allows me to go through certain tests so I can learn from it that way.
Yes.
It's similar. It's alignment. I feel like if I were to choose my path, I'd be in a way better situation from start to finish, right?
Yeah.
So how does that correlate to when you came to Orlando when you were 23, right? 23, got on the plane with your daughter, got here in Orlando. How did that choice change the trajectory of your life towards entrepreneurship?
In a way, that was probably the first piece of it, the first choice, because it was the first time I made a decision without asking permission, without, I had to basically say, I am doing this, and you can either be on board with it or not. And I don't mean that in a defiant way or a hateful way. It's just, here it is what I feel really pulled to do at this time in my life. And I am going to, I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to take a risk. And entrepreneurship is a risk in so many levels, right? So, and sometimes people believe in it and sometimes they don't.
Yeah, like, for sure.
And so in a way you are saying, I am making this choice. I believe so fully in this vision that I have, and I am choosing to follow it without knowing every step, without knowing, I'm not sure what hardships are going to come. I know they're going to come.
Yeah.
but I am saying yes to it because I believe that there is something fuller and bigger on the other side for me.
Yeah, I think the power of choice is so crucial, especially when you are so used to having choices made for you. And because of that, it does two things. It puts you in a box, like we mentioned earlier, of a belief of how your parents wanted you to be raised because they had this destiny for you or whatever the case is. But I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term generational curse breaker.
Oh, yeah.
The only way you become that generational curse breakers is if you break the decisions of the past decisions.
Yes.
Right? So once you moved to Orlando, now run me down more about the story. So you got here in Orlando, found an apartment, got used to the Orlando traffic. Let's start from there.
Well, it's actually Jacksonville, but
Jacksonville.
Yeah,
Sorry.
All good. So, my life evolved. I evolved, became the person that I needed to be to live the life that I had chosen.
How long did that take you?
I would say a couple years, really, to an extent. And then just continued. I always felt 10 steps behind everyone. Here I was in my early 20s working as a preschool teacher, and then meeting and hanging out with people who were so much further in their careers, in better careers. And it was like, I felt really delayed. And again, it was something that at the time I felt very victimized by that. And played the blame game, like I should be so much further, yada, yada, yada. If I had had more opportunities, I would be the same as them. So there was a whole mindset piece that I wasn't really, I hadn't really learned how to shift my mindset and shift my perspective on things and utilize it to my benefit. But what I was doing was, okay, I don't like where I am. I have made changes that I moved, I made these changes, I made these decisions that have allowed me to grow. I can keep doing that. So even if I am behind wherever I should be, whatever that is, who sets those rules anyways, I can still keep progressing. I don't have to stay stuck.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that I've always had. I think I have this just restlessness that can actually be a really, really powerful tool.
I agree. I think a lot of people could see that situation in two ways. The first way of seeing it like, oh, this person has more than me, and then turn into hate. Like, oh, I don't want them to succeed, talk bad about them and behind them. Then also you can see that, they're not behind, I'm a little bit behind, but I'm using them as motivation to keep going forward. So who was that for you in that time frame? And what did they do to speak life into you to make sure that you move forward?
That's good. That's a good question.
Thank you.
I think that I would say, trying to think of one specific person. I don't know that it would have been one specific person. I think in general, it was my surroundings. The one thing I always did at that time in my life is I chose really good friends. And so
how do you choose good friends?
I honestly, I chose the friend. Actually, I do know. I was going to say I don't know, but I do know. I think that I was subconsciously, I wasn't doing it intentionally, but I was choosing friends that were already the people that I wanted to be in some level.
Do you feel like you just naturally gravitated towards them? Got it.
Yeah. And somehow they gravitated towards me too, even though in some ways I hadn't achieved as much. I hadn't reached the same levels as they had, maybe career-wise or financially or whatever. But I think it was more on a soul level. I had a maturity in my soul that was magnetizing.
Mm.
And so I didn't really have to try to make those friends. They just kind of came.
Yeah.
And I think I'm a pretty friendly person. I'm pretty cool.
Seems like it. Seems
And
like it.
I would get invited to everything. I would get
Yeah.
invited to just hang out at so-and-so's house. And it was like, then I would see how they lived. You know, they would bring me into their inner circle very quickly, very easily.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though I wasn't living at the same status as they were,
Yeah.
I was brought in, I was welcomed in, and I was always surrounded by expanders. And that's what I think of as people who help us grow. They are expanding us. They're showing us what's possible. And
I love that perspective.
yeah, so I was always around them. And so I was continuously growing and looking for ways to better myself, learn more, get a better job, get another certification, just whatever I needed to do
To expand. I think that was a beautiful, beautiful scenario, because the point that you made without saying it, and I already know you said it, was your environment is your your environment is the crucial point from you taking your life to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
And it also can show you what your future can be and where you are now.
Yeah.
It's just a self-reflection thing. So the more people you hang around that has more or has a bigger status or is doing better at your age or higher, just shows you that you're in the space of connecting at that level.
Yep.
Because a lot of times those type of people only want to connect with people at their level. So they have to see something in you for them to want to bring you around. So it was one of those things for me too. In my space, I knew I had more in me. I knew I wanted to be around people at a higher level. I wanted to be seen and respected at the level. And the more people that are at a higher level that see me and they're like, yo, I see a lot of me in you. And that was my driving force to continue to keep going forward and walking in that destiny, right?
Yeah.
So for you, it was cool for you because you were able to be exposed to that earlier in your life, especially coming from a background of just being single-minded, small-minded, small city. How was that for you? Was it a total nervous system shock, reshake, reform? Or what was that process for you at the time?
It was. I am really grateful, though, because of all of those wonderful people that did kind of find their way into my life. I always felt like I had somewhere safe to fall, even though I had kind of ripped myself away from all of my comfort zones, and I didn't have family here. I had to build that for myself. And I think that sometimes we have to put ourselves in those situations that are really uncomfortable to see how we're going to survive. And I also had a really good motivator to do that because somebody from back home had said when I left, I give Heather 6 months. She's going to be crawling back on her hands and knees in 6 months.
That chip on your shoulder.
And it was like big middle finger, you know?
2 of them.
And 2 of them. And so I was so determined to prove that mindset wrong. Not that person necessarily, but that mindset. Yeah. I was so determined to prove that I was bigger and better than that.
Yeah.
That I built a life for me and my daughter that felt safe.
What was that in you that instead of listening to that and saying, again, it goes back to the part where we're talking about how you can look at hate or people's comments differently. You can use it for motivation or you can use it to bring yourself down. But what was that driving factor for you that allowed you to be like, oh, I'm surpassed 6 months now. Look at me now. Like, because I've had, like, seriously, building the Luminary Panel, I started out building it with a chip on my shoulder. But once I realized I didn't see the compassion in the project, it wouldn't be sustainable. It'd be something that was just something that was done to prove somebody else wrong, that I can get it done without them.
Yeah.
Rather than me saying, hey, I love what I do. I love every step of the process. It's a lot more sustainable. And now I can get to a different level because the vision is so clear, right? So what was that for you? Because mine was like, yeah.
I would say that at first it was similar to what you just described.
Got it.
Like, I'm going to prove you wrong. Like, who are you? You know, that same like mindset. Over time, as I think I'm going to take this back a little bit, but I think that the reason I and you maybe had that same kind of outlook on it, that same chip on the shoulder, you don't fully believe in yourself yet sometimes. And
that's so true.
I hadn't achieved what I wanted to achieve yet. I hadn't proven anything to anyone. I hadn't even proved it to myself yet. And so mixed with the big decision of I'm going to do this big thing and I'm going to succeed at it is also a fear of, oh shit, what if I don't?
Yeah.
What if I don't?
Yeah.
And
at the Luminary Panel, our mission is to become an immediate resource to you as the aspiring entrepreneur. With that being said, we've partnered with SCG, Shamaa Consultant Group, the business development one-stop shop. They have everything you need as far as marketing, benchmarking, and so much more, so that we, as the Luminary Panel and SCG, can help you thrive in your business.
when you feel the urge to leave, know that you'll be okay. Know that you'll fall on your feet.
Yeah.
And know that you have invested so much energy into your environment, your circle, the people that are in your life. You, once again, you have that safe place to fall.
That's perfect.
And that's, safety is where we have to feel safe. We have to know that we'll be okay.
Yeah. That's so good, because a lot of times, a question that we've all probably heard before, but it didn't hit me until we just had our past workshop a couple of weeks ago, or actually Wednesday. And the question that I always do when it goes from speaker, then I actually come up like, hey, let's do a transition, let people network a little bit, and then I'll go into speaking. But the question for this past one was, if you knew failure wasn't an option, where would you be 5 years from now?
Right.
And a lot of people don't understand the capacity of your being, of being in a place where failure wasn't an option. So for you, once you realize the components of not failing in your life, how did that compel you and like push you forward to what you did after that realization?
Leaving that relationship was the big kicker for me to make a lot of changes in my life. That's when I started going to therapy for the first time.
Nice.
That's when I started learning about attachment theory and how attachment theory, because at that time I thought I was going to therapy to heal all of my relationship wounds. What I didn't realize was that was actually the container for launching me forward in healing in a lot of other areas.
Wow.
And so it started with looking at attachment theory. I read the book Attached. I don't know if you've ever read that book. It's a good book.
I'm going to look it up.
And it was eye-opening for me because all of the areas in life where I had felt disempowered, I suddenly realized I am empowered. I am the empowered one in my life. And I get to change anything that I don't like about my life. I had never had that perspective before when it came to, I had that perspective when it came to like, I can move, I can get a different job. But when it came to changing my patterns and why patterns were repeating in my life, I just didn't have the knowledge about that. And so I suddenly felt so empowered. Like that was literally the first time, reading that book was the first time I can say I ever felt empowered in my life.
Wow.
And because it was like, okay, I can change my relationship patterns. That means I can also change my financial patterns, my career patterns, I can change anything. So I can literally think of sitting in my bed reading that book and literally feeling my life change, literally feeling me go from victim mode where I had lived forever into empowerment.
What'd that feel like?
Like a release, like such a release of the world is my oyster, like the sky is the limit. And that's where I then started seeking out other mentors beyond therapy, other books, podcasts. Then things started to come. And I always say, seeking is the first step. As soon as you start seeking, you don't have to even know what you're looking for. You know you're looking for something. And all you have to do is seek. And if you seek, the answers will start to come. God, universe, whatever you believe in, will start putting them, they will start crossing your path. And that's what started to happen. So I was like head first into personal development. This was back in 2019 and 2019, 2020, and just, I couldn't get enough. And I actually asked a friend of mine at that time, I said, is it possible to do too much self-work?
That's a good question.
I know. I was like, am I doing too much? Like, am I out of balance the other way now? And she said, you're going to know when you need to even out. She said, just keep going, keep reading what you're reading. Because I was like, I have no desire to read like a fiction book, or like all I'm reading is like personal development books, and I'm journaling, and I'm doing all these things. Is that bad? And she laughed, and she was like, no, you've found something that you need right now. Keep giving it to yourself. Yeah. And also stay open for when that needs to change.
That's good.
So don't be too attached to anything, right?
Yeah.
Just go with what you feel and let it take you to what you need next.
What were you doing in your career at the time?
So at that point, I was a preschool director. So I was running a center in St. Augustine. So I was responsible for everything. We had 100 plus kids. We had, I had 20 employees. And so I was running the whole thing. COVID happened. We went from, COVID happened in the middle of that healing journey that I'm talking about.
Wow.
And we went from 100 plus kids in the building to 20 in a matter of a week.
Wow.
And I didn't know if I was going to keep my job. I didn't know if we were going to stay open. We did end up staying open. Ended up, my job was safe. Everything was good. If anything, it gave me a lot more time for diving deep into all the work that I was doing.
Yeah.
And then through all of that process of healing is when I realized that, okay, career was next.
Yeah.
Career was the next area of focus for me. And it was during that time that I said to one of my girlfriends, I'm going to work with women one day in the health and wellness space. I don't know what that's going to look like. I just know that in my journey, so many women have come into my life in various forms, some of them as physical coaches and mentors, some of them through podcasts and books. And I want to be that for someone else on their journey. So that was like the first moment that I knew at some point there was going to be a career shift for me. That would have been in 2020, early 2020. And anyone who doesn't feel 100% fulfilled in the path that they're on, it's okay to feel that. And this was so important. This is, if there's anything that I can share with anyone who feels like they're in a place of transition, but they're not fully sure what that transition looks like, you don't have to. All you have to do is keep following the urges. And because I get asked this a lot now, like, how did you know what to do? How did you get from preschool director to health coach? And honestly, I did it through journaling. I did it through getting very quiet and very still, finally being able to be alone with myself. I had a big problem with being alone before. Aloneness scared me. And getting to the point where I reveled in being alone. And because I started to find the answers in that time through journaling, through reading, through just growing, taking in, and gradually that got me towards health coaching.
Yeah, that's awesome. What I've realized with the word transition, it also equals scarcity because you never know what's on the other end of that transition. So again, building the Luminary Panel, I never told you this, but I was working with MBA guys at the highest level on the skill development side.
Wow.
So to your point, that fulfillment in that space, that chapter is closed a while ago, but didn't know how to tell the person I was working with, like, yo, I'm not feeling this anymore. I don't feel like this is my purpose. I need to step away. And one day I just made a decision to do it and not know what was happening after that.
Wow.
Until I was like, okay, cool. All right, now what? Then I went to networking events. I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And ever since I made that decision, every single thing has fell in my lap effortlessly. So let's transition. No pun intended. But let's transition to the part where you realize that the preschool director career was over for you.
It happened. It was happening over a period of months, and I could feel myself just feeling so disconnected from that role, and it literally felt like I was no longer serving that role the way it needed to be served. And it was like, it's time to
doing you a disservice and them a disservice.
Yeah, it was like, you need to transition out and focus on, at that point I was in the process of getting my health coaching certification, and I was working with a women's empowerment coach at the time who was helping me get started in my business, even though I didn't have my full certification yet. I wasn't coaching anybody, but she was helping me build an online presence and get going there. She was actually a real driving force in getting me started. I was the one holding myself back, and she was like, you gotta start your business. And I was like, but I don't have my certification, and because that's just an easy excuse, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I can't put myself out there yet. What will people think? What does Heather know about this?
Yeah.
And so I was starting to create that online presence for myself, put myself out there, and left the preschool job. And actually for a period of about 9 months or so, in that time I finished my certification. And in that period of time, I took like very small jobs that were enough to pay my bills, but gave me the time, freedom that I needed, because the preschool director position was a lot of work, a lot of hours, and that was sucking me dry. That was sucking all of my energy, and I needed to free up energy for my passions. Yeah. And so I did what I had to do to get by, kind of in a way went into hibernation of sorts. It was like, world is going on around me. Friends are still doing stuff. Their lives are continuing. All I can do right now is kind of hunker down and focus on me, focus on where I'm going, this direction that I'm going. Once in a while, I'll say yes to something. Once in a while, I'll go out and see somebody. But really, I just have to stay focused. And I also had to save money. But it was just stay focused. Just stay focused. And so that's kind of how I made that transition.
Nice. So, again, on the call, when we got introduced by Carrie Lane, she's actually one of I think she's our third episode. But when she mentioned you and told me your story and we got on the phone, this decision for you hit you at a red light.
Yes.
Let's talk about that part.
So I was playing phone tag with the admissions department of the school where I wanted to get my health coaching certification. And we had been playing phone tag for about a week. And there was a tuition deal going on at the time, and I wanted to take advantage of it. And it was ending that Friday. And so I was driving home from work, and I had tried again that day to reach out to them. And we just kept missing each other. And it was about 7 o'clock on a Friday night, and I was at a stoplight. And I know exactly, I know what lane I was in. And I was at a stoplight. And I kind of just put my hands up, and I was like, okay, like, it's not supposed to happen right now. This wasn't the direction I'm supposed to go right now.
Yeah. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
In that moment, was that the moment of releasing control? Mm-hmm. Or was it that you just like, okay, what's next?
It was a little bit of both. It was like, because I wasn't saying it in like a angry or upset way. Mm-hmm. It was not like I guess that's not going to happen. It wasn't a frustrated thing. It was just like, okay, that wasn't supposed to happen right now. Mm-hmm. And like, it's okay to let go of it and see what's next.
Yeah.
And literally right then as I had that thought, my phone rang, and It was the admissions lady, and she's like, I'm so sorry, I've been really busy. Do you still want to sign up? And I like pulled off, and I went in the parking lot, and I signed up right then and there. Wow. It's like I just knew. I knew that this was where I wanted to go to school. This was the direction I wanted to go. Nothing had ever felt so aligned for me.
That was awesome.
And everything about that whole experience of getting my certification, I finally felt like I was learning something, and I was going down a path, not just because I was good at it and could do it, but because my soul had found its purpose. And that's a really good feeling.
Yeah, so rejuvenating.
Yes.
All right, so I guess we'll ask a couple more questions because I know you have a busy schedule. So once you got your certification, what was next for you? Like from your first client to where you are now?
At first, I felt very, I felt that I had to build my business the way every other coach built their business. Mm-hmm. So I would follow business coaches. I would follow other health coaches. I would do trainings. I would do, all of this stuff, gathering information. It was still channeling that part of me that didn't feel like I was good enough. Mm-hmm. How are people going to hire me as their health coach?
I want to ask you, how do you distinguish looking up to someone to be motivated rather than looking up to be that person? If I'm making sense with the question.
You are, because there is a very clear distinction.
Yeah.
I know that now from where I stand. And I think it is 100% okay to always be gleaning inspiration from people. It's okay to hear people's stories. It's okay to look at their business model. It's okay to look at what is working for them and then go, how does that feel for me? And that's the piece that I wasn't doing. I wasn't checking in with myself on how does that feel for me?
Got it.
And so I was looking at, okay, this person is successful doing things this way. That means I have to do it that way too.
Yeah.
and sometimes that felt really out of alignment for me. And it was like, okay, so I have to, my social media has to look like this. My website has to look like this. I have to be doing lives that are like this. I have to be doing posting like this. And, and a course, it needs to be built like that. Like, so it's okay to learn from those things and pull pieces from all of those coaches and businesses and whatever. But at the end of the day, you have to take all of that and really sit with it and decide, what does this feel good for me or does it not?
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
True.
And I just wasn't doing that. And that took me down a really long journey of frustration, still self-worth stuff. I just must not be good enough because it's not working for me.
Yeah.
To what you said earlier about when you started what you're doing now and how it's been effortless and everything has fallen into place. That is what's happening for me now. And how I got to that point was I was paying yet another business coach to go through her program. And these are fabulous people. I would recommend them. It wasn't that it's not that they aren't doing what they should be doing. It's that I was out of alignment. I was not trusting myself. And I was still looking outside of myself for all of the answers instead of believing that I had them. And so I was in yet another course. Everything I did, she was saying my social media was wrong. Well, you need to be doing it this way. And I was so caught up in this web of perfectionism that as soon as I learn how to do it perfectly, then the clients will come, then this will happen. I had to let that go. I got to a point where I was like,
Make sure you're talking. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. I got to a point where I actually stopped. I didn't stop like taking clients, but I stopped trying so hard. I stopped trying with social media so much. I stopped because I was like, I need to take a minute and I need to reconnect with myself.
Yeah, there's a clear difference between working hard and trying hard.
Oh, I was trying hard.
And I think a lot of people misunderstand that concept because of social media and how it's been programmed to us, like, oh, if you're not working hard, you're not making this much. This is what working hard looks like and where you can go, rather than, like we always like to say, being authentic to who you are. And because you're authentic to who you are, the things that are deemed and promised to you will come to you when you're ready.
Exactly.
And when it's ready for you.
Yeah. And how I made that transition was I went back to my journal and I sat and I actually journaled, what did you like to do as a kid? And I went back to being a little girl, and it was literally making a list. What did I like to do as a child? You know, when we're still free, we're in the process of being programmed, but we're not fully programmed yet. And what did I do even when people laughed at me and made fun of me? And to me, that was things like I loved to write. I would go sit out in the woods and I would just write poems. I would write songs. I would just write anything. And nobody was doing it with me. All my friends were busy playing. Or I liked to make mud pies. So I was very creative and I was very expressive. And as I started to journal about what did I like to do as a kid, it's like you need to get back to doing those things that you authentically like. Stop thinking, how is this going to connect to a client? How is this going to connect to money? Start thinking, what feels good? What's feeding my soul? And so that's when I started my podcast.
Nice.
And that's when I started writing my blog. Nice. And it was like, don't think about, why am I doing this? How is this going to work for me? Just do it because it feels good and it's getting you back to your roots in a way. And as I did that, that's when the whole retreat, I started actually journaling around what feels good for me in my business. what do I like about what I'm doing and what do I not like about what I'm doing? What lights me up? What doesn't light me up? Just started making lists. Okay, well, I need to do more of that. I like to write. I like to speak. I need to write. I need to speak. Like, create those opportunities for yourself. Don't wait for somebody to give them to you. Just start doing those things. Really, really simple.
Yeah. Actually, to piggyback on that,
Yeah.
we, so I had one speaking engagement when I first started, like, this whole thing. And I was in the networking game very heavy, very quickly, and very efficiently based off of the people that were the center of influences. So, I realized I was still the new kid on the block, but I made some significant like growth from the point that I started networking to like a month after I already had my first speaking engagement, and I've never done a speaking engagement.
Wow.
So from that point, I realized because I'm new and I still have a platform that's kind of starting to get the credibility, I created my own platform as far as what we do for our workshops. So I can create that speaking engagement rather than waiting on someone to say, "Hey, you want to come speak for us?" Because they're not comfortable with me yet, but I know I'm comfortable with myself with doing that. But now I have the privilege to give other people a platform to speak on, and it makes me feel more rejuvenated because it's a platform for them to empower our audience. If that makes sense. So
Makes
that's
perfect sense.
Yeah.
I love that. And along that line, so I started, just giving myself that place to speak, to write, whatever. Started getting clear on what do I enjoy. The retreat idea started to happen. Ever since the retreat vision started to come into like reality, opportunities like this, like being here today, have just kind of fallen in my lap. Like, this is the third podcast I've been on in 3 weeks.
Our pleasure.
But I'm not trying.
No,
right?
Yeah. And it makes it that's the best part of it, because it's like sometimes when things are going so well for us right now, it's like I feel like I'm not doing enough. But it goes back to what we talked about earlier, like, am I ready for this? Am I worthy of this? Am I actually doing it because I see myself being compared to other places that I want to be, and I compare myself to other podcasters that I could see myself being at. And like, for example, one of the inspirations of why I made the transition from basketball coach to doing something outside of that was Lewis Howes. I read his book, The School of Greatness.
Okay.
And it drastically changed my life after the last page of that book. It talked about his story where I was in a similar situation. And I was like, oh, shoot, this got to be destiny. And I read it. He's like, yo, I was doing this. I was in the NFL. I got injured. I thought I was going to be there for forever. But I always loved having conversations with people. But at the same time, he's very unique to what he does and incredible to what he does. But his journey inspired me to chase my journey. And that's the whole premise of why I built this program, this platform for people that are watching this that need that inspiration as well.
I love
from the Inspiring Entrepreneur. So with that being said, this will be our last question.
All good.
I know we probably need a part 2 because we're going to keep going back and forth. So we always inspire to aspire. And we always think 3, 4, 5 years from now because we have big goals. Like the other day I was talking in the speaking engagement, and I was like, I was thinking too far ahead where I had my mentor, Ivan, have to like kind of slow me down because I'm always a big thinker.
Yeah.
I was like, yo, I want to get on Netflix. How do we do it? He's like, yo, you need to slow down. We gotta get through episode 1 first. So for us, we're always wanting to take the backseat route of the Inspiring Entrepreneur, because obviously you have a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of experience, and also you know what works and what doesn't work from your journey, right? So we always like to ask all of our guests, what are the things that we need to do to make sure we ensure that we continue to get to that goal?
I believe you have to stay open and you have to stay humble. there's always growth to be had, even when we've reached this goal and this goal and this goal.
Mm-hmm.
You just keep setting new goals.
Yeah.
And I think that if you can always keep that like childlike willingness to learn, like innocence in a way.
Yeah.
You never know it all. You've never experienced it all. Some of the people who've been the biggest impact on my life are, again, not necessarily people that I've met face to face, but they are people that I've heard on a podcast or read in a book, and their journey of growth and not being afraid to share their story. And that's helped me share mine.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, those are the people who not only are they continuing to grow, but they're talking about it. They're sharing it. So you don't feel, it helps you feel, if you're someone who's just getting started, it helps you feel a little bit closer to them, to whatever level you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And I just think that's really important, to keep that connection. It doesn't matter how successful you've become in business. How can you still connect back and be that leader for others?
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that advice. Where can they find you? What are some things that's coming up? What do you want our audience to look out for?
Yeah.
For sure?
Check out my website, rebelisticwellness.com. So Rebelistic is rebel and holistic put together.
Oh, that's cool.
Because when you choose to take a holistic approach to your life and to your health, you are oftentimes going against the norm, and you're channeling your inner rebel. So that's where that came from.
That's a very well-played name.
Yeah.
I like that.
So rebelisticwellness.com, and that is where all the information is about my retreats, the luxury wellness retreats for individuals, for couples, for small groups.
Nice.
Great option for team building, corporate like wellness events. And we're actually doing a webinar in a week. And so by the time this podcast is released, that webinar will be over, but it's still going to be available.
Nice.
We're going to be talking about the retreats. I'm going to have my whole team of experts on there sharing self-care advice and really great guidance.
Nice.
So good value in that webinar, as well as just more information on the retreats.
Awesome.
Too, so
are you on social media at all?
I am, yeah. So Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So look for Rebelistic Wellness or Heather Beebe. I'm there.
She's there. Thank you guys so much for watching another episode of the Luminary Panel. Again, my name is Chauncey Jennings, and we look forward to seeing you in our next episode. Peace.
That wraps up another enlightening episode of the Luminary Panel. We hope you enjoyed the conversation between Chauncey Jennings and Heather Beebe and found their insights as valuable as we did. Personal development is a key ingredient in the recipe for entrepreneurial successes, and today's discussion highlighted just how transformative it can be. If you love this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with fellow entrepreneurs who could benefit from these insights. Also, make sure to follow @The Luminary Panel on all social media platforms. Thank you for being a part of our community, and stay tuned for more inspiring conversations.